Facebook, or if you have it up on there, and if you would be so kind to share it. If you go on the OCSDA Facebook page or YouTube page, share it to your own places. That would be amazing. Okay, so we are live, and just want to welcome everybody to the We Are Not Okay Part 2 conversation. And this evening, we're going to be talking about non-optical allyship and what we can do as women in community to build safer communities for our Black community. And so we're just going to kind of go around the squares here and just introduce ourselves. And each woman can just share a couple sentences that they'd like people to know about them. So we're going to start off with Sue-Ann. Sue-Ann, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So hi, everyone. My name is Sue-Ann Hall. I live in Ottawa with my son, who's 3, and my husband. I have a background in criminology and psychology and international relations. I'm currently at home with my son, enjoying that. I blog and I create content for Scars and Crowns, and I've been sharing a lot about allyship, particularly non-optical or non-performative allyship, and I'm really excited to be here with all these wonderful ladies here to have an open conversation with you, and hopefully it will be helpful for everyone.
Thank you. Okay, Alexandra, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm currently living in Ottawa. I'm an undergrad student at the University of Ottawa studying health sciences. I work for Ottawa Public Health, and right now I'm studying for my MCAT exam, so keeping super busy.
Amazing. Is that, this is a really terrible question, but how hard is the MCAT exam?
Really hard. It's a 5-hour exam covering 4 different hard sciences.
Okay. God bless you, honey. Anne, can you tell us about yourself, please?
Yes. Hi, my name is Anne. I am based in Ottawa. About myself, I'm currently working with the government, like 40% of Ottawa's population. A lot of us work with the government here. I'm going back to school in September. I'll be starting law school here at U Ottawa. And on the side, I guess I run a nonprofit called Unilearnal, and we had a project called 28 Moments of Black Canadian History in February, and we're very, we're pretty much an organization that centers the Black experience, our history, our present, and our past, and everything. So that is me.
That's amazing. Unilearnal, everybody.
Unilearnal.
Go follow. So good. Okay, Lorianne, can you tell us about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Lorianne. I live in Hamilton, Ontario, which is the waterfall capital of Canada. So I love to be outdoors. I love water. So that's what I like to do. I went to school in Alberta to study early childhood education. So I worked with the little ones, and I am currently expecting a little one of my own. So exciting.
Thank you for being here. Rochelle, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Rochelle. I live in Toronto. I'm married. I'm also a teacher, specifically a music teacher. I play a bunch of instruments because I teach band at my school. Also, I am the librarian at my school. So I help kids find resources. I help teachers find resources. And yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Miss Lily?
Hi, I'm Lily. I'm currently in Toronto. I am a private special education consultant. So I run a consulting business, and I also run a nonprofit that has 3 locations across 3 different territories in Canada right now, as of last year. I work primarily with special needs communities. I also have a speech language pathology background and audiology, as well as education. So I try to bridge the gap of services between what is available, what could be available, and what the community who needs it knows about.
Yes, and we know that there are lots of gaps. So we're glad that you're here. And ladies, I'm so excited about this conversation. It is part 2. And last time we talked about your Black experience as women and how you experience racism. And one of the things that we talked about last time was how important it is for us to have non-optical allies. And so, why do you think it's important for us to have this conversation that includes non-Black women? What do you think, Rochelle?
So I think it's really important for us to be able to have these conversations, especially in a safe space. It allows us who are of colored skin to be able to have conversations about how things are affecting us, and to teach those who are, who are non-Black about what we're experiencing and ways that it can help us. I think it's really important that we talk about these things together so that change can happen. We can't do it all by ourselves, as you can see, these centuries of things that have been going on. Working together is the only way we can get through some of the stuff that we're going through. And it makes a difference having non-Black people as allies, because not just when we are in the room, but when we're not in the rooms, making sure that certain things take place, standing up for injustices when they're happening and not, passing it off as something else, or, not talking about it at the time when it's happening. I think it's really important for us to work together when it comes to these things that we're about to talk about.
Absolutely. Lorianne, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's important when we look back at, the beginnings of feminism, and, women were fighting for their rights to vote. It was important to have men who were standing by the women who were protesting and who were working so hard for that. Men did the damage. And men needed to be there to fix it. And in the same way, white people have done the damage, and they also need to be there to fix it. So it's important to have, just like it was important to have, men to push feminism forward and women's right to vote forward. It's important for white people to also be there and acting.
Right. Before we go any further, I just want to say that, we're going live on Facebook and YouTube platforms. I just want to say that this conversation that we're having is one for positive change, not for people to come on and be unkind or rude in any way. And so the comment section is not for trolls, it's for questions. And it's for comments that you might have. And so this is a safe place. And this is what we're having, this conversation in a safe place. So we love your comments and we love your questions. So please go ahead. If you have things to say or you have questions for one of the panelists, please let us know. We want to engage with you. And so this is an opportunity for each one of you to briefly share a little bit more why it's important to have allies or to be a non-optical ally. And so, Sue-Ann, do you want to just go ahead and share what you think?
Sorry about that. I was muted. So I think it's very important for us to have allies in every field, in every area possible. I think the more people who really have a better understanding of what it is that's going on, what it is that we experience on a day-to-day basis, and the fields that they work in, will be able to have a better change. I think for a lot of people, it's not easy, but they can accept maybe, systemic racism or white privilege or whatever that may be. But in a day-to-day basis, they don't understand how that impacts beyond police brutality or beyond, lives of Black people being taken or people being incarcerated. It's very basic, but I think once you start looking into things more and more, and that's growth, obviously, people are able to see things and make changes in the areas and push for those changes in their workplaces, in their homes with their families. So I think that's why it's so important for everybody to sort of be involved.
That's amazing. Alexandra, what do you think?
Yeah, I resonate with so much of what Sue-Ann said, as well as what Rochelle touched on. And I see a lot in where I work with communication specifically, that you need to have those conversations that aren't being had in those circles. And it's our job to start those conversations. And so for me, that's been my most important thing. First is to start those conversations where they're not being had. And then secondly, just to be that support system that is needed for Black people. And I was telling people, like, the first couple weeks, it was a matter of just listening and being there to hear the stories, to be there to understand the experiences, and say, like Lorianne said, we did the damage and we're here to listen and to make change. So that for me is the two most important things: to have the conversations and be that support system.
Amazing. Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone had said already. And I guess like the point that like just that I'd like to bring up as well, it's important to have allies and that they're non-optical as well, right? Like to stress that part, because a lot of the times, you know, people when they're coming forward in like under the guise of allyship, they're taking up space and taking up positions where, like, you know, Black women, Black people are already in, and that just does more damage, right? So it's like, it's in a sense, like as an ally, you're there to amplify the work that's already being done, not to replace the people who are doing that work. So I guess like in being there to amplify the work that's being done, what you're doing is helping us push, you know, our work forward, because we do not have access to the same type of resources that white people have had or non-Black people have had historically. So it's important to have those people, you know, as much as it might sound weird, but like kind of like in the background to help us push that move or push our work forward, because right now we are doing the work. It's unpaid, and like most of the time it's like Black women who are leading it. But it's like the impact is like almost felt at a community level, right? But with allies now, we could actually drive society, like change at a societal level. So I think that's where allies can really help us in you know, changing the world and making it a safer space for everyone.
Let me just ask you a question. When you say that, you know, non-optical allies can kind of push the work that you're doing, when you think of your nonprofit, Unilearno, how can non-optical allies push the work that you're doing? Because it's really amazing. Yeah. What can non-optical allies do?
Well, for one thing, like I found that the impact that I had, like I said, it was very at a community level wise, right? So I got a lot of feedback from Black folks, of course, but like the content that we were creating was for it's Black Canadian history is Canadian history, right? So everybody needs to know these things. Everybody needs to be aware of our history. So like the basic thing, like the most simplest thing someone could do is follow or share the content, right? And another thing, like, you know, this might not be as obvious, but a lot of the work that we're doing, like I said, is unpaid labor. So, you know, like we live in a capitalist society, so like the amount of hours I put into this project, I lost count at one point, right? But like to keep us going, right? If we need more content and we know that it's important, half of that is, you know, supporting it through likes, through sharing, talking about it, but also maybe, you know, pointing us to the resources that we don't have access to, right? Donating to the work or donating money to help us fund the work that we're doing, the programs that we know that we all acknowledge are helpful. So those are like two like main ways, at least in my case, that I think that allies could, you know, better support me.
That's good. And I hope everyone who's watching hears what Anne is saying. We have to put our money where our mouth is a lot of the times. We can't just say, oh, good job. You know, we also need to fund these projects and these initiatives. Lily, why do you think the non-optical allyship is important?
I think one of the things that is an obvious reason why is because of the fact that we have so much social media that is so visual. And I feel that a lot of the times it's very surface. So talking about non-optical allyship, the fact that there's even a term for that now is a little strange to me, because anybody who has been working towards equality, equity, social justice, anybody who has ever been involved in any community services or in any decisions that are made on a provincial and federal level has probably not had a term for allyship. I think a lot of the times we were just called advocates. And so when I'm looking at allyship, I look at the roots of just advocating. And what advocating is lending your voice, like we've said before, in rooms and spaces where other people are not. So that means that I'm using whatever influence I have, whatever network I have to push this fight forward. I think that's one of the most important roles that the term ally or allyship can be. It's to be that amplification. It's to not drown out the voices that are already there, but to give them the circles that they may not already have. It starts off in our families. It starts off in our own communities. It starts off with our neighbors and friends. But really what it comes down to is, how are we journeying together as Christians? We shouldn't be journeying by ourselves. Anything that's a barrier or a wall, we're supposed to be taking those things down together. So as much as it is great that we use a platform like social media, it's going beyond that. Are you educating yourself? Do you actually know the history? Are you voting for people who are representing these types of views and these types of perspectives? You got to put your money where your mouth is, but you also have to put your action where your mouth is, because we can't just rely on the government or somebody else to change things. That's why we haven't moved forward. We've left this responsibility to other people. So I think it's really important right now to use this momentum and use this societal tipping point that we're experiencing during COVID-19 to really make changes, not just on this level, but on a larger picture level.
Right. Awesome. Rochelle, do you want to share with us?
So I like the point that Suen mentioned about having that allyship within your respective areas of like work. It makes a big difference, because we may not, our goal right now is to try and reach as many people as we can as we're having this conversation, but we all have our networks that we work in, whether that be in education, in the law field, whatever field that might be in. And we each have our own battles within that space. I can talk like as a teacher, I have colleagues that, you know, if I feel like I disagree with a point, maybe in a staff meeting, who will support me. And it makes a big difference if you're speaking up and having that support behind you. That's the only way change is going to happen. And as I mentioned before, making sure that it's not just when, you know, I'm there, but when I'm not there, you're also trying to push certain things forward. There's a lot of things, at least in the education system, that can be changed, but we can't do it by ourselves. There's a lot of things in the laws that, you know, for example, just the whole Black History Month thing that we have going on. Right now, it's, you know, like it's a national month in February, but it's more than that, because as Lorianne said, it's our history, right? It's our history that we have to be talking about. It's not just, you know, the European history that came, but it's everyone's history, Indigenous history, everyone's history. It's all, we're all in this together. So we have to talk about it.
Absolutely. You know, I'm not sure what you guys learned in school, but when I was in school, which is like a million years ago, I didn't know anything about Black history except for Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railway. No one ever taught me about segregated Black schools in Canada. Very little about Indigenous community and what they are going through. So a lot of it is silent, right? And I'm sure, I don't know what your experiences are with education growing up, but I think we missed out on a whole bunch of important history. Lorianne, can you share with us, why do you think non-optical allyship or advocacy is important?
Yeah, so what we've been seeing a lot right now on social media is a lot of, you know, sharing posts and stuff, which is good. You know, to share the experiences, things that people are going through, or to share posts that have anti-racist content or phrases or whatever. And that's good. It shows, it's that beginning step. It shows that you recognize that there's a problem. But are we taking it further? It's necessary to take it further, because posting might show someone else something that they may have not seen, which is good. But I think to promote actual change, we need to take action. And so some of us have mentioned it already. There's a lot of things that you can do to fight for change. I wrote a couple things down so I wouldn't forget. So educating yourself is a big thing. Obviously, educating yourself with books, documentaries. There's a lot of information out there. So that's one thing that you can do. Signing petitions, supporting Black businesses, supporting businesses that are doing work for Black communities, and then not supporting organizations who are racist. So there's a lot of things that we can do, that we can actively do, donating funds, supporting initiatives, going out there and protesting. Those are the actionable items that are actually going to create change. Back when we look at slavery or segregation, what was it that changed all of that? I'm sure there were plenty of people who thought, wow, like, this is something that's horrible that's going on. It's not something that should be happening. But it was the people who actually went and did the work to stop that is what created change. It's how we moved forward. And so right now, it's important for us to take those actions, because we've mentioned already as well, I just lost my train of thought. Pregnancy brain, thank you, on live. Anyways, yeah, you guys kind of got the point I was going towards.
Thank you so much, all of you, for just sharing your why. And I think this is where we get into the nitty-gritty right now. With Lily said, this is like a social tipping point. George Floyd's death brought it to the forefront for a lot of people around the world. And so what has changed for each of you? Is there something that you've learned that you didn't know before? How are we listening better? How are we learning better? How are we acting differently? Have you found a cause to kind of work from? Is there a particular nonprofit that you're supporting financially? What has changed for you? How are we doing things differently? So you can go ahead, if somebody wants to go ahead and answer that, just go ahead and unmute yourself. Well, actually, I have a question for Anne. Did you start Unilearnal? When did you start that and why? You have
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Hold on. Same as this. I can't, there we go.
Okay.
Okay, now I can hear you, sorry.
No.
I didn't hear your question though.
Oh, you didn't hear the question. I was saying,
No.
What was it that made you start Unilearnal? Because I know you had done work before on voting, right?
Yeah.
But what made you start Unilearnal?
Yeah.
Was this a response to what you were seeing?
So the thing is, like, it started with with the 28 Moments of Black Canadian History project. Like, my intention was just, I'm going to do that and then just leave, and then, whatever happens. But then, so that project started from my own, realization that I knew nothing about, Black Canadian history and how much that impacted my present, and then, how I was moving, in society and everything. So that's where that project started from. But then, as we saw, and I was working with Fitch as well, who goes to the Benjamin Church as well here in Ottawa, we kind of saw the impact that it was having, how people were receiving it, and how a lot of people were shocked with the things that we had recently learned as well, right? So from there, we were like, yo, why not just, continue with, the momentum that we're getting with, that we have right now, and actually establish an organization and hopefully find funding for the work that we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really amazing that you pivoted so well to address what you didn't know and turned it into a project that could help so many other people.
Because I think it's important that we really like realize that the past is the past is the reason why things are the way they are now, right? So if we don't know, like if our history has been completely erased, which it has by the government, then we can't address the issues that we're trying to address right now, right? So it's important that we have that basis to be able to dismantle the systems that are like literally destroying Black people and Indigenous people in Canada.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Anyone else? How are you living differently or learning differently? Or is there something that you go ahead, Alexandra?
Sorry, I was just gonna say that for me, like the big thing when I saw that first question, I thought like, what hasn't changed for me? And I think I've taken more active steps in probably every aspect of my life, but specifically within my degree of health sciences. And I really took a step back and realized that I was studying the injustices and the prejudices and the racial disparities and all that stuff within my lectures. And so to me, those problems were present. But then I realized that specifically in that area that most people were not aware, like Anne said, like we just don't know unless we bring it to the front. And so for me, that's been something that I've been really researching and looking into more than just my degree and seeing like, okay, how can now I look into these issues and take better steps in the future with my degree and as I move forward in my career. So for me, that's the biggest thing that changed was picking one specific area and making that change, but also just making active change in every single part because we all have a part to play. And I know that there's, even as I keep learning, there are still more things that need to change for sure.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
I think I echo some of that in a way, in that I don't just look at what changed, but also what didn't change. So for people who know me, stepping into a more public space about these particular issues, and most especially dedicating my social media accounts to educating people who may not know the history of things, that's something that changed for me because my background is, after I was born in the capital of the Philippines, which is Manila, my parents were stationed in Suriname, South America. So geography-wise, it sits in between French Guiana and Guyana. It has close ties to Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica. And so it has a very mixed community that's there because they were colonized by the Netherlands. So that in and of itself is just my starting point. So my starting point is I'm a Filipino coming into a very mixed region with influences from everywhere, but our official colonized language is Dutch. Like just speaking about that, right? And our regional, the language that I heard the most, and for people in Suriname, you can tell the area we were in when I say that the language that I heard the most is Surinamese Hindustani, which is a mixed dialect due to the people who live in Suriname. So from there, immigrating to Southern California and being the odd kid out, not just because I was coming from a different country, but also because I was Filipino. It was kind of like a fish out of water until I went to a school that had more people that looked like me, but I still never fit in. So there's always been a part of me because of how many times we've moved. Before we came to Canada, and I came to Canada in 91, before we came to Canada, I moved at least 9 times. So for those of you who are listening and who watch this later, if you are a pastor's kid, a missionary kid, someone who grew up with parents who were in like the Army or the Navy or any armed forces, you know what it's like to move around. So although I disliked that, the advantage was that you have this awareness and this history that other people may not know of. So I have been, and advocate and journeying in social justice for as long as I can possibly remember. And it's been tiring. So the one thing that changed about this is that it allowed me to see just how many people didn't know history. It allowed me to also see how many people within my own culture did not know the impact of colorism in our own culture. It was just eye-opening to understand that the life that I lived was unique in the friend group that I have and how wide my network is, and to realize that people have been living in these pockets and bubbles, and to have that level of understanding that it's not supposed to be a condescension, it's supposed to be an education. So I always talk about building bridges and bridging understanding, and it's about linking where people are to what actual history is and what current issues are now because of what the history has been. It's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do. And it's also why I started the nonprofit in 2016, and why we specifically, our pilot project started in Nunavut, Yukon, and the Northwest Territories, because that's actually our origin.
That's right.
Canada's origin starts with that. So if we move in that way, if we actually have accurate history, oh, let me tell you, it's been hard, because I've actually talked to Pearson, McGraw-Hill, education publishers, to remove this Eurocentric view of the world and give accurate history. I mean, is that really revolutionary?
Did they tell you to get lost?
They did back in when I started, but they are not telling me to get lost now.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
So the thing that changed for me is just the realization that there's so much more bridging work to do, and that everybody is at a different level of understanding. But in order for us to really impact change, we need to be moving forward together. Otherwise, it's just a crazy person coming to you with an idea,
Right.
and you get dismissed, right?
Yeah. And I don't know how many of you saw on Saturday, the Adventist teens had a discussion on racism in the church. I mean, geez, if we think society's having a hard time, our church has a hard time too. Anyone else want to jump in here about change, or how they're doing things differently, or what caused them to do things differently?
I'll talk a little bit about what has stayed the same but has also changed for me. I did mention that I was a teacher. I started off teaching, or being the teacher librarian at my school a few years ago. And during that process, I learned a little bit or a lot about Indigenous education history that I didn't learn when I was in school. That even goes as far back as to Teachers College, as I mentioned in our last part one of this. And it really moved me. I remember hearing my professor, who was affected by the 60 Scoop share, what it was like to be removed from his family and not know where his brothers and sisters were, to be growing up in the States. And I remember hearing that story and crying in the classroom, sitting in my seat crying. And then later on, I got the opportunity to become a teacher librarian. And that's when I really felt this drive to share that information with my students. So I started sharing it with whatever kids I could possibly, and I would do it in ways that was appropriate for as young as kindergarten all the way up to grade 8. And then most recently, this school year, actually, I went looking for Canadian history books. So Anne has her non-for-profit that she started during that month of Black History. I did share it with a lot of my colleagues on Facebook, and they shared it with their students as well. And it was really helpful, because when I was, speaking to my students about it, I had that history that I didn't know when I was growing up about Canadian history. You mentioned, Pastor Liz, that we learned about Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman is American. She did a lot for, you know, us though, because a lot of the slaves she brought up to Canada.
Mhm.
But a lot of people don't know that she was living in St. Catharines afterwards. And so it's all of these little tidbits that I was so surprised I didn't learn growing up. So now, ever since what happened with George Floyd, I have this new fire lit under me to
Yeah.
learn more of what's going on so I can share it.
Do you find that your students are like, oh, Mrs. Christopher, can you give me books about Black history or our Indigenous community? Or are they like, they have no idea?
They have no idea.
Okay.
And sometimes I'm a little bit hesitant in even talking about Black history because I almost feel like I shouldn't be the only one talking about it because there's not that many Black teachers at my school. And so sometimes I feel like I'm the spokesperson and I don't want to, but I also don't want that opportunity to be missed for those kids.
Right.
So on top of talking about that stuff this year, I also was talking to them about activism. And it was funny because it was right before COVID and everything shut down and we were like full speed ahead. I had a whole thing planned about how women have changed the world and it doesn't matter how old you are. And we were talking about all of that stuff right before COVID hit. And then the George Floyd situation happened.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that, you know, my students have been able to connect what I was talking to them about beforehand, and we'll see what happens in September. Because there's a lot of things we
teachers literally shape our children. Yeah. So thank you for what you and Lily do for our kids. Anyone else want to jump in here about how they're doing things differently or learning differently?
Sure, I'll go. I feel like what's changed for me is that people are listening. That's what's changed the most. I share or I heard a lot about my personal experiences, and that obviously has to do with me as well, being a Black woman, me being a mom, and how I introduced multiculturalism, diversity, all that stuff to my son as well. And after everything that happened, people were wanting my opinions on everything. I almost felt like I was the Black suburban mom expert on. Oh, can you hear me now?
We're missing little chunks of what you're saying, and your video is a little.
Oh. I don't know why. It's strange.
Okay, try.
Hopefully you can hear me. But what I was saying was, yeah, I felt like I became sort of like the quote unquote expert of raising a Black child or raising children to be anti-racist. People wanted to know how to raise their children not to be racist. They wanted all this stuff from me. I felt like it's almost like you have this opportunity and this window where everybody wants to listen. You just feel obliged to share that information, and sometimes it's so draining. So that's really what changed for me and my feeling like I need to push things out and have so many of these conversations, not just for myself, but I just think of my son and the fact that like I don't want him to, like, that's actually what pushes me, is that I would rather do the work now than have to roll up to his school later to deal with a teacher or a parent or a kid that said some sort of comment or is in a certain way. That's really what encourages me. And that's why I'll have the conversations often with the moms in my DMs about, look, like this, you know, it's more than just pick a couple of books off the list that I created and give it to your kids, and all of a sudden they're not going to be racist. That's not how it works. Like, it's a start. It's a great start. Like, if you had no books with diverse children, by all means get some, but you need to go further. You need to have conversations. You need to do your own work, and what the own work look like. And sort of, I almost feel like sometimes like I'm coaching them along the way of what that could look like. This is what you can do next. This is what you can do next. Read a book. Look into this. And sometimes I share little tidbits, but I feel like that's what's changed. Like, people want to listen, people want to hear, but I know on the other hand, that is very exhausting for BIPOC people. And in that short window, post George Floyd's death, like it was very exhausting for Black people. We have the emotional trauma of watching that over and over, and everybody posting like, oh my gosh, look at this is so terrible, and hearing about it all the time. We have people who are still being like, well, it's too bad, this is how it is, and people just, this is not really racist, this is not this, and like still not accepting that, and trying to deal with those people, trying to deal with the people who have said they were allies but are not showing up or just posting about their own personal feelings all the time, and then the people who really want to learn. And it's just like, and then your own personal feelings and managing those of your people who are close by and your friends and your family and how they're handling that trauma. So I think that's changed a lot for me, and just being extra aware of that, and also having conversations like these has changed. I've had a couple of these conversations, and conversations with our community, with our church community, with our Christian communities too, with our local communities, and how we can move forward and be better. Like there's a group on Facebook for my community, and they got signs. They started having vigils, and you know about our area, you know, Liz, where I'm at. They started putting up lawn signs for Black Lives Matter to show their support in our community, and that was such a beautiful thing. Like I would never have expected that happened in my little suburbia space, but I'm proud of them. So I feel like that has changed, but I'm happy to see the movement, and I just really hope that it continues and goes more, deeper into, like I said, our fields and our families and our places of worship. So
yes, you mentioned like just the trauma of seeing everything and experiencing and reliving things. The North American Division, the health department, is doing a special recovery for emotional trauma tomorrow, 4:00 in the afternoon. Recovery for emotional trauma, finding healing in the midst of COVID-19 and racial tension. And so if that's something that you're interested in, just let me know. The presenter is amazing. Lorianne, did you want to say anything about how you're living differently?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the topic of trauma. I was having a conversation with someone, with a mentor of mine from church, about epigenetics, and it's basically the thought that when trauma alters your DNA, and so even before a child is born, when you're carrying a child, that unaddressed trauma that has altered your DNA, you're passing that on to your child. And so that child is might struggle with anxiety, might struggle with depression. And I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that before. And I kind of associated that with the Black community and with the Indigenous community. There is this generational trauma that has been passed down, and a very heavy history, 400 years of slavery, of residential schools, that just gets passed down. And it's incredibly difficult to deal with that trauma when it is still happening, when the abuse is still happening. And I just find that sometimes people, will mention, in Black communities, there's a lot of crime, or in Indigenous communities, this happens. And it's incredibly frustrating that people feel the need to bring up things like that. But understanding epigenetics and how that changes people, I think, is extremely important to understanding and just having a better picture of all of this. It's something quite deep, and it's something that it was something new that I learned. And another thing was the systematic oppression, understanding how deep the racism goes in different sectors, like in education and in medicine, in the medical field, in jobs, in housing, in prison systems, like to see that it runs so deep in all these different sectors. It's like the systems are set up in a way for Black people to fail. literally. And for anyone who wants this resource, 13th is a documentary that I watched recently, and it kind of explores mostly like the prison boom and everything surrounding that. And it was really eye-opening to see how that all started, the deep racism in that system. And I think when people can really look into those things, like educate themselves in those areas and understanding how things work, it just gives you a clear picture of like, it's really mind-blowing, I think. But learning those things have definitely been, yeah, that has changed, I think. And when people bring up ignorant comments like that, I now know how to respond to something like that. So yeah, that's
what do you say to them? Do you say like mean things?
No.
What do you say?
Sorry?
Well, like your response, do you have like a standard response for ignorant comments?
I don't have a standard response. It depends on what the person says. And then I will try, I don't talk about opinions. It's not about opinions, it's about facts. And so I will give you facts that I know, right? Because I don't know everything, but I am learning. And a part of that learning, I want to learn because I want to be informed, but also I want to know what to say when those ignorant comments come up. Because if I'm not educated, if I'm not informed, when a family member says something that's extremely ignorant, what do I say? Do I know how to explain it? Do I know what to say in that situation? So, because you do want to say something, right? You don't want to let it go. But you also need the information to be able to respond.
True. It's interesting. It's just appalling, actually, how intentional and deep racism goes in all of these different sectors, like you were saying, Lorianne, that the years of intent to be so messed up, mean, raw, and violent towards the Black community. It blows your mind. So we have about 10 to 15 minutes here, and I'd really like to just switch gears for a second and talk about all of us on this little chat here. Some of us know each other, some of us you just met for the first time, but there's one thing that we all have in common, and that's our love for Jesus, right? So what can we do as a community of 7 women, Black and non-Black women, to create lasting change and positive influence in our circles of at work, or our circles of influence online, or in our family? What can we do? And so if you can think of one thing, one like practical thing that has helped you create some positive change. Lily had asked me a question. She said, do you have resources if people are looking for some? I mean, she's such a teacher, right? One thing that has really helped me, and I don't know if you guys have heard this, Latasha Morrison started a nonprofit called Be the Bridge. And if you go on Facebook, you can join this Facebook group. It's called Be the Bridge. And you have to there's a couple of questions before they'll actually let you in. And one of the prerequisites is that when you join the group, you stay silent for 3 months and you commit to listening. You can like a post, but you are not allowed to comment on anything for 3 months. And you have to take 6, I guess, classes or kind of take these little core workshops, so you can be intentional about how you learn, to learn the language, to hear the experiences. And afterwards, then you can kind of start actively participating in the group. And they've got thousands of people on this, and their goal is to be the bridge to bring racial reconciliation to communities. And so that's one practical thing. If you're looking to actually make some changes in your community or in your churches, join Be the Bridge on Facebook and learn. They will actually give you There's curriculum available for you to take to your church, or even to a bunch of your girlfriends or some maybe people that you work with, and just do it there. And that's how that organization got started. Was a friend of hers, Jenny Allen, she's a white woman. She actually said, you know what, like, I have an adopted son who's Black, and I want to learn how to be better for him. Latasha, can you just like talk to me? And Latasha rocked up with like 3 or 4 of her Black women friends, and they just kind of just started meeting together and talking. And then Jenny brought some of her white friends, and they were just honest about these conversations, and it grew and grew and grew. And Latasha started this organization. So think about what has helped you, and what is one practical thing that can create some lasting positive change. What would you guys advise?
I could go. I will turn some folks to some pretty good resources. So immediately when Lori Ann, she mentioned 13th, I haven't seen it, but I think it's based on the American context. I'm pretty sure it's the American context, right? So a book that like so thorough, so beautifully written is Policing Black Lives by Robin Maynard. Like, she addresses everything in history till now and makes the links and the connections. And I'm telling you, like, the first 2 chapters, you're going to be like, I learned so much. How are there more chapters to it, right? And another book touching on police brutality in Canada is The Skin We're In by Desmond Cole. These two books, I promise you, you'll learn so much, and it'll be easier to be an ally, and easier to call people out, right, on certain things. And on top of these resources and reading through them and informing yourself, I think one thing that really helped me in being a better advocate is being okay with the fact, or like, I guess, abandoning the notion that I need to be perfect, right? When I'm calling someone out, like that I need to say like the perfect thing. It has to have like all this information behind it. It has to be like unbreakable. You know what I mean? Like it's something that like really stops me from saying certain things sometimes, because like when I see something that's wrong, I'm like, oh, I don't know the perfect terminology to, you know, to address that. But like, we have to understand that like saying that something is wrong is enough, right? This is wrong. I need to like step back and collect my thoughts, but you can do your research to figure out why this is wrong. You know what I mean? And that's enough. That's enough to like spark up a conversation, or have that person that's creating that harm to do their own research. So, you know, informing myself and also like abandoning the notion of being like the perfect ally or the perfect advocate is also something that helps me in moving forward.
Thank you for saying that, because I think that might stop a lot of people from actually saying something because they don't know it all.
Yeah.
That's very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to go?
I'll
Go ahead.
First of all, Anne's books are amazing. They're actually great. So I suggest everyone does go in and check them out. I think just listening to people when they speak and they share their experiences, I think there's that notion that a lot of people want to fix the problem. I want to believe that most people are not trying to shut people up, but I really think that people want to believe that everything is always okay, especially in our community or our church settings. Where it's just like, oh, that person couldn't have possibly meant something racist, or like that couldn't have been a microaggression, because we want to believe that people in the places that we worship are inherently good people, and that they couldn't possibly have these negative tendencies. So that's a big one for me. When somebody speaks, when somebody's sharing their experiences, and this goes beyond just racial, I think we really need to listen, and we need to try to understand, like, and not try to cut them off or find, you know, ways where they can be wrong, or find holes in their quote unquote argument. So that would be mine. And then just support them with love. Like, you don't have to have the right thing to say to comfort them. If they're telling you that they had a bad experience, you don't need to you can't maybe fix exactly what happened, but you now know that experience, and you know how to look out for it and how to check it moving forward.
Right.
That would be my.
I just have to say, you do that for other people as well.
Yes.
Yes, you do.
Thank you.
Thought I'd share that. Anyone else want to share?
I think one big thing for me, I'm a huge mental health advocate, and that's something that I constantly look into, and I help and volunteer at the Royal Mental Health Center here, and something like and Anne touched on this before, but creating those connections in the community for people who are already doing work, like, and pushing their work forward. And so for me, over the past couple months, my practical way of creating change has been contacting these centers and mental health resources and saying, who are your Black mental health professionals or people of color mental health professionals, and how can I create a direct link between the community members to those specific people? And because I don't think it's anybody else's job to create those links. I think that's an important part of allies, is to be able to create those links. And as Sue-Ann said, say, I'm listening to your story, I love you, and I'm here for you. And then be able to provide somebody that can further support those people. So for me, that's the most practical thing, is calling out those organizations who are supposed to be there supporting everybody, yet there's still those broken links and divides, and just saying, hey, like, I'm going to support those who have created those links, and I'm going to call you out and ask you to create those links for our community members as well.
That's awesome. Anyone else?
I just want to add like a starting point, because I know that a lot of what's happening right now is like you're viewing things and you're learning things for the first time and you're reading books. So you know my son and you know his friend circle and my friend circle as well. And I think something has to be said about, look at the people who are your friends. If you do not have a variety of friends from perspectives, different ethnicities and things like that, grow that circle. Because what really lights the fire in someone is when either you've gone through the experience yourself, which is a personal fire, or you empathize with someone in such a way that you want to help them remove that barrier with them. So expand your friend circle. Knowledge is good, but community as well, to really genuinely journey with people. That first week after George Floyd, before I started going, like, I was loud on social media to my Filipino community and for education, and I put out all these resources in groups of 10. But in that first week, what did I do? I went through my contacts. I went through my WhatsApp groups. I went through my Facebook groups. I went to classmates, friends, people that I personally know, just to see how they were doing. You know, so it's expand your actual circle that you journey with. I think that's a good starting point for some people.
That is so nicely put. You know, when you were talking about that, I wrote down, get some friends, but you said it so nicely. You said, grow your circle, which is just a way better way to say that than get some friends.
Get some friends.
Yes. Lorianne, what is one thing that you could share that would positively impact change?
Well, I really love what Lily just said, first off. And a couple of you have already mentioned, you know, the listening piece, and that was kind of what I wanted to choose. But we get very busy in life, with work, with extracurriculars, with our children, with our family. We can get very busy. And so, you know, there might be people who are saying, I understand that there's a problem, but I don't have time. I don't have time to go to a protest. I don't have time to, or I don't have money to donate. But there are things that we can do. If this is a cause that's truly important to you, you are going to carve out that time to educate yourself and to take action. So if you have 15 minutes in the morning to scroll through Instagram, maybe use those 15 minutes to look for a petition to sign. Maybe use those 15 minutes to read 1 or 2 pages of a book. If you want to sit down and watch something on Netflix, instead of watching, you know, a drama or whatever, watch a documentary. you know, we can do things and slip things into our routine so that we can continue to educate ourselves and to take action. It's really easy to sign a petition. It's really easy to buy something from a Black business instead of a big conglomerate or something like that. So being intentional about taking action is important. And if this really is a cause that is important to you, then you are going to take the time and you are going to use your money to support the cause.
You are so right. You are so right. You know, everybody talks about how busy they are, but you make time for what's important in your life. We all do it. And if we say we love Jesus and we say that we're Christian, this has to be important to us because it's just not right, right? So thank you so much, ladies, for being here this evening. And I just want to say, you know, people have been talking about this for the last couple of months, but you just shared really simple things that people can do to create lasting change. To read, pick up a book, watch the documentary, listen to what is happening around you, listen to your Black community of friends. And if you don't have friends, grow your circle or get some friends. And you know, if you're somewhere and you're literally like in the middle of nowhere and there's no other BIPOC people around you, pray and just say, God, can you please send me a friend who can kind of enrich this experience that I want to feel, so I can, you know, hear what their experience is like. God will send you friends. To create connections, I love that. To support Black businesses and projects like Unilearnal. There's another one called Uplift Kitchen. They provide meals to individuals who identify in the Black community who might not have the money to either go grocery shopping or to get their food. This is in the GTA. So Uplift Kitchen, they need your funds, they need your support. And so does Unilearnal and many other initiatives and projects and businesses out there. This is really important. If you're really looking for ways to create lasting change, nobody's asking you to run for like some political office. Like, these are just really simple things that you and I can do to create change. And so thank you to each one of you. And as people experience emotional trauma, which they are, you know, Alexandra reminded us that you might be looking for a Black therapist or a Black counselor, and you might not know where to go. But you've got people and friends like Alexandra who are making those connections for you and who are kind of filling in those gaps. And if you're looking for resources for your children, you've got Sue-Ann on Scars and Crowns, and you've got the librarian, Mrs. Christopher, who's going to say, hey, look, I've got resources. And you've got Lily, who's, you know, petitioning our educational textbooks and things like this. We really have no excuse when we have 7 women right here, 6 women that have changed the perspective of those of us who maybe thought, oh, well, I can't really do anything. So we really have no excuse. Thank you so much, ladies, for being part of this conversation tonight, and look forward to We Are Not Okay Part 3. So we're gonna end our Facebook. Thank you everyone who was watching, and thank you for the comments and the questions. I'm just gonna ask the panel to stay on as I close the Facebook, okay? All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.